Hey everybody, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll. I'm a reporter, editor, guy who takes out the garbage at valleyindy.org, a nonprofit paper, online paper that started in 2009. So it's a municipal election year in Ansonia, Seymour, and Derby, the communities I cover. And I thought we would try something different in Ansonia this cycle. You know, usually we concentrate a lot on the mayor's race. Maybe we'll have a debate every couple of years. But this year I thought for the aldermanic races, we would do meet the candidates with anybody willing to participate who's running for the Board of Aldermen. And my very first guest, you might recognize that last name. It goes back a couple of years in Ansonia, from what I understand, is Mr. Bill Phipps. Hi, Bill. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask just a couple of basic questions. And the first one is, you're obviously an incumbent on the Board of Aldermen. What ward do you represent? And then, I don't know, what are the neighborhoods that you represent in Ansonia?
I represent the second ward. It's one of the older wards in town. It's mostly blue collar, multifamily housing, two family, three family.
And like, what roads are we talking about? Not all of them, but just give me a sense.
Well, like North State Street, Prospect Street, Woodbridge Avenue. Yeah, those are the big ones. And down to Beaver Street.
Then how many terms have you served so far on the Board of Aldermen?
I am completing my first term.
And then, did you have any political experience, any elected political experience prior to first being elected, I guess 2 years ago it would be?
No, sir. I've got a lot of experience with municipal activities, but it's all volunteer and appointment. This past year was the first run I actually had.
And then in terms of some of that municipal experience and community service, talk to me about that. What have you been doing? How long have you lived in Ansonia, I should ask you, first of all?
I've been here my entire life, born and raised in the second ward. Well, a little bit in the first ward because they changed the ward boundaries, but pretty much the entire life.
And then what are some of you? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, went to the regular schools, Assumption School, Ansonia High School, Southern Connecticut. I got an associate's degree. I went into industry, 20 years with the Farrell Company. That's where I picked up the trade as an apprentice, and I was in industry my whole life. With the town, I've been a football coach, baseball coach, going all the way back to when I was 20 years old. And I just sort of followed that. 19 years as a Pop Warner coach and a volunteer firefighter. I think I'm going to year 57 with the Webster Hose Company. And wow. Municipally, I did about 20 years on planning and zoning and inland wetlands. And otherwise, kept myself busy trying to stay out of trouble.
Right. And then in terms of that first run at the Board of Aldermen, what motivated you to put your name into a hat? Because obviously, and if anybody doesn't know, and I think sometimes people who only watch casually or maybe don't follow like city politics on a regular basis, it's not a paid position. This is volunteer work we're talking about here. So why'd you throw your hat into the ring?
Well, I've always been, I'm proud of my town. And I've always been interested in the way a town works, the way municipal government works. And I joined the Democratic Party, and I was convinced to get onto the committee, Democratic committee. And the next thing you know, I was being talked into running for the Board of Aldermen. I had no particular focus on it. I was sort of led into it, and I don't regret it. There's a lot of work. There's some disappointment, but for the most part, I'm contributing and helping my town survive and succeed. There's probably both of those verbs are appropriate.
And then just based on my observations of some of the alderman meetings, I mean, there's been Ansonia politics. I've only been following it since 2009, right? And when the Valley Indy first came on the scene, it was all Democrats on the board, essentially. And then it seemed one election, it completely changed. There was a 180. Then it's been all Republicans for a while now. So what do you see? And right now you happen to be in the minority party on the board of aldermen. What do you see as your role as a Democrat in the minority party on the board of aldermen currently?
Well, sort of a watchdog, I suppose, if they want to use that word. Representing my ward, of course, but making sure that the majority party stays on the straight and narrow, plays by the rules, and does things properly. I have a tendency, I think, either party, when you get total control, sometimes you skip corners, you get a little relaxed on the way things should be done and when they should be done. Those are generalities, but I guess the minority party is just a watchdog. And that's the purpose that we're doing this year. Our focus is to get some balance on the board of aldermen. We don't have a candidate against Mayor Cassetti, but I think the balance is important for a balanced government.
And then what have you been doing so far in the election or the campaign to sort of get your name out there? I mean, everybody knows the last name Phipps. Of course, it's probably, the highway. Is I assume that's Route 8 there? That's named after, is that a descendant? Are you a descendant of?
That's a bridge. It was dedicated to my brother Brian, who was Vietnam veteran, and he retired from the National Guard as a brigadier general. And he passed at the age of, I think it was 60 or so. And he was a police commissioner. He was a football coach. It was part of I think it's in our gene pool to share and give back. And he was, Joe Crisco had efforts in Hartford, and we were proud and blessed to have Brian memorialized on Route 8 there.
Yeah, and I apologize for my ignorance. I didn't realize it was that close. I didn't realize it was a brother there. That's quite amazing and quite an accomplishment there. But back to my question. I'm sorry for going off on a tangent, but what have you been doing thus far in the campaign to sort of tell people, hey, there's municipal? I mean, there's no mayor's race this year, so I think that makes it harder. Because that's usually the one that everyone looks to in terms of a campaign. So what have you been doing on your level to let people know there's something going on?
Well, it's we have our turf lists, as you call them, that are generated from data from previous elections and so forth. And I have my list in the second ward, and it's just good old shoe leather, knocking on doors, introducing myself if they don't know me, and explaining what we're doing. The mayor is getting a free pass, if I can use that word, so they don't have to worry about choosing a mayoral candidate, which has a tendency to twist the entire election when you've got mayor running against mayor. But I said, put me back, I represent you, and what we're after is balance. It's important that we get balance on the board. And most people are pretty much receptive to that. It's tough to get people today, obviously. So we have a door hanger that we put on the doorknobs. It sort of introduces us. But that's it. It's hammering on the doors. I can do that, obviously, because I'm retired. So, but I find out the second ward is a lot of hills and more stairs. So
yeah, you're in better shape than me. So how about in terms of, you look back over your first term here, the last 2 years, is there any particular thing that you're proud of, that you feel you've accomplished or played a part in over the last 2 years?
That's a good question. I find myself having a tendency to take in the opposite opinion or the minority opinion with respect to Olesen Drive. I've challenged that. I'm thinking that it's a done deal when it comes to the board, and absent anything else, I know people say, "Oh, here he comes." He's going to put his 2 cents in. But Olesen Drive is the one that sticks in my mind. The police station, of course, I've been vocal about it. I was a little concerned when we had to go back to the well and look for another $3.5 million when we pull that off with the COVID utilization. And it was a little disturbing, but we're going to have a nice building there. Hopefully it's going to open pretty quick. I don't have a date, but
there is some progress. Yeah. How about in terms of, I remember a couple of years ago, Ansonia politics got really toxic, and maybe social media played a part. And now it's been said that, that's what Facebook wants, is people fighting, because that's what keeps people coming back. But it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, I mean, I'm not, I don't have my ear to Ansonia every second of the day, but it seems that the infighting, or not the infighting, the fighting in general has sort of lessened. And you're an example of that, because you're there at a meeting and you speak your 2 cents, and it may not be the majority of the board is going one way, and you'll chime in and say, "Hey, what about this? You're serving as a check on power, it seems to me, and that's what you've just said. So how do you keep politics from being personal? And do you think that's happening in Ansonia? Did we sort of cross that line out of sort of the partisan personal attacks to more about disagreements on policy?
No, I think we've been very fortunate, the board, in that respect. We all seem to get along. We respect each other, and in some cases we have friendships outside of the board. But I'm proud to say, for the most part, we can be civil and try to move things along. Josh is a good, he runs a good meeting, and we're all, well, we haven't taken our shoes off yet and bound them on the table. So I guess we're hanging in there. But I think it's a good board. We're lucky probably, because I know a lot of towns have some nastiness that goes on right down to the personality levels, and nothing gets done when you get to that level. So.
And my last question to you, assume you get reelected. I mean, I don't even know at this point. I haven't looked at. I'm starting to arrange the interviews this week, so you probably have GOP challengers. I apologize, I'm not sure, but let's say you get reelected. Is there any 1 or 2 things you hope to accomplish in the next 2 years if you're back on the board?
Well, I've got them specific. I would like to see Olesen Drive remain green space, so to speak. I've always admired what Shelton was able to do with theirs downtown with the slab that became the park, and I think that'll work well in Ansonia, and it'll be a benefit to everybody. It'll mesh with the apartments we're building, and with the restaurant row that the administration likes to brag about every chance they get. And but that's one thing that I think will be a focus as we move forward, and get the buildings torn down on Upper Main Street, particularly my old homestead, the Farrell Company Foundry. So, but that's important, because that's what hits everybody right between the eyes when they come into town, and it's not good curb appeal, as they say.
Right. Yeah. At one point, a nonprofit newspaper was able to rent space near there. That's how cheap the rent was. But now it's I had to move out. It got too expensive. But just you brought up Olesen Drive a couple of times. We just have 1 more minute. But is that something you're hearing a lot from people as you're knocking on doors? And if anybody's not familiar, Olesen Drive was a former Riverside Apartments, federally subsidized housing, was torn down over the period of a couple of years. Now, essentially, it's an open field. The city is in the process of trying to take acquisition of the property from the Ansonia Housing Authority, because that's a federal agency technically. And there's this plan that the Cassetti administration has endorsed by a developer to come in and turn it into a private recreation complex. Soccer, I believe, would be the mainstay. But then there's this argument that Mr. Phipps and other Democrats have put forth saying, well, if we have a chance at something we can use, some type of open space that Ansonia people can use as our own, and it can be municipally owned, we should go that route. First of all, is that a correct summation sort of the issue there?
I think so. It's open space, which is important in our town, and it'll bring balance to the Naugatuck River. We've got industry, we've got the retail on one side, housing on one side. Well, here's a blow off. Here's where people can go to the other side of town and kick back, relax, exercise. A lot of opportunities are there. A lot of potential, but if we, if we sell it, then we have nothing.
And do you think that is an important issue to the people? Is that what you're hearing? As I started to ask before, and then went off on my own. Yeah. I tend to blab, but are you hearing that from people as you knock on doors?
No, I'll be honest with you. No, not too many people have mentioned it. It's hard to get contact today because people are so distracted, and it's not an issue that's brought up. My constituents don't have strong issues. In fact, they will agree with me when I bring up the fact that we've got to have balance. But it's a strange electorate out there, and I'm not a seasoned politician by any stretch. And but there's a lot of people out there that we have to take care of because they just don't know what's going on anymore. There's no media, there's no newspapers, they're pretty much immune to what's going on locally. So we've got a pretty heavy load to carry to keep them out of trouble. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting because even without, I always question how, even if, let's say we had a daily newspaper that covered Ansonia every single day, at this point, I question whether people like I'm 47, would I even read it? Because people seem to be so, I don't know. Well, I'm going off on a whole tangent here. That's an editorial that people don't need to hear from me. But let me just throw it to you for the final part here. Is there anything else you want to add, Alderman Phipps, that I haven't asked you that you want to stress?
No, I think you've touched on the high points. It's my town. I've always taken proud of it, and we're doing some pretty dramatic things to the town. So we keep our fingers crossed too, because there's some leaps that are going on that hopefully they'll work out. We've got 2 roads in town that go from north to south, and one of them we've made one way. So I don't think the final chapter is written yet on what that's going to do to traffic. It's a nice little addition. I don't know if you've seen it there on East Main Street. They dolled up the area a little bit, but I'm a little apprehensive as to what it's going to do to the traffic patterns. And again, we just have to wait and see. In the senior center, when it goes up to the police station, and do we have enough parking there? There's some unanswered questions that we're going to have to watch and be alert to, because it could fall apart too. We're a small town, and our main street is rather compact, and there's not a lot of elbow room, and we've got to be very careful as to which way we go. Hopefully, the apartments will come to pass. It seems like forever they're building them, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and I guess neither are the apartments.
All right, let's end it on that, sir. I want to thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes and talking to me about yourself and this campaign, and best of luck to you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, take care.
Bye now.